In 1964, General of the United States confirmed what tobacco companies had known for 15 years. Cigarettes cause cancer, not might cause, not are associated with, cause. Direct causation. Smoking cigarettes gives you cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and a dozen other fatal conditions. The tobacco industry's response? Deny everything. Fund fake research. Bribe scientists. Destroy careers. Launch the most successful disinformation campaign in corporate history. For 30 more years, they kept selling cigarettes to children, lying about addiction, and killing their customers. They knew their product was lethal. They had internal documents proving it, and they chose profit over lives. Tobacco companies killed more Americans than every war in US history combined, and they got away with it. But here's what they don't teach you. Tobacco didn't just kill millions. It built America, literally. The American colonial economy ran on tobacco. The founding fathers grew tobacco. Slavery expanded because of tobacco. Wars were funded by tobacco taxes. America exists because of a plant that kills 8 million people per year. This is the complete history of tobacco, the drug that built a nation, enslaved millions, and created the blueprint for every corporate mass murder since. And it's still legal. Tobacco is native to the Americas. Indigenous peoples used it for thousands of years before Europeans arrived, but not the way modern people smoke cigarettes. They used it ceremonially, ritually, medicinally, sparingly. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, the Taino people gave him dried tobacco leaves as a gift. He threw them away. He didn't understand what they were, but other Europeans quickly figured it out. By the 1500s, Spanish and Portuguese sailors were bringing tobacco back to Europe. They'd seen Native Americans smoking and chewing it. Some tried it themselves. They liked the buzz, the nicotine rush. Tobacco spread across Europe fast. Not because it was healthy, early users knew it caused problems, but because it was addictive. Once you started using tobacco, stopping was hard. Jean Nicot, the French ambassador to Portugal, promoted tobacco as a medicine. He sent tobacco plants to the French court, claiming it cured headaches, toothaches, and dozens of ailments. It didn't, but his name became associated with the addictive chemical in tobacco, nicotine. By 1600, tobacco had spread to Asia, Africa, and across Europe. Governments tried to ban it. The Ottoman Empire executed tobacco users. Russia whipped them. England tried to tax it out of existence. None of it worked. Tobacco was too profitable and too addictive. People wanted it, and merchants wanted to sell it. And that's when America enters the story. In 1607, English colonists established Jamestown in Virginia. It was a disaster. The settlers didn't know how to farm. They didn't have enough supplies. They were dying from disease and starvation. The colony was failing. Then John Rolfe, who would later marry Pocahontas, started experimenting with tobacco cultivation. He obtained seeds from Spanish Caribbean tobacco, which was sweeter and milder than Virginia's native tobacco. He planted it in 1612. It grew. He cured the leaves. He shipped the first 4 barrels to England in 1614. It sold immediately at high prices. Tobacco was in huge demand in England, but supply was limited. Virginia could grow it cheaply and ship it back. Profits were enormous. Tobacco saved Jamestown. Within a decade, Virginia colonists were growing tobacco exclusively. They grew it everywhere, in the streets, in their gardens, in graveyards. Land that should have been growing food was growing tobacco. They became dependent on a single cash crop, and that dependence created a problem. Tobacco farming is labor-intensive. You need workers to plant, tend, and harvest. Lots of workers. Initially, Virginia used indentured servants, poor Europeans who agreed to work for several years in exchange for passage to America. But indentured servants eventually earned their freedom. They'd work, get their land, and leave. That wasn't sustainable for plantation owners who wanted permanent labor forces, so they turned to enslaved Africans. The connection between tobacco and slavery is direct. Tobacco made slavery profitable in the American South. Before cotton, before sugar became dominant, tobacco was the crop that drove the expansion of chattel slavery. Growing tobacco required constant labor. You planted in spring, transplanted seedlings by hand, weeded constantly through summer, monitored for pests and disease, harvested leaves individually as they ripened, hung them to cure for weeks, then stripped and packed them for shipping. Every step was labor-intensive. A single tobacco plantation needed dozens of workers just to remain profitable. Enslaved Africans couldn't leave, couldn't demand wages, couldn't refuse, and their children were enslaved too, creating a permanent labor force. For tobacco planters, this was the perfect solution. The tobacco trade triangle worked like this. British ships brought manufactured goods and enslaved Africans to American colonies. American ships brought tobacco to Britain. British merchants sold tobacco across Europe. The profits financed more ships, more goods, more enslaved people. The cycle perpetuated itself. By 1700, Virginia and Maryland were exporting 28 million pounds of tobacco per year to England. By 1775, that number was 100 million pounds, almost all of it grown by enslaved people. George Washington grew tobacco at Mount Vernon, using enslaved labor. Thomas Jefferson grew tobacco at Monticello, using enslaved labor. James Madison, James Monroe, most of the founding fathers were tobacco planters who owned slaves. The American Revolution was partially financed by tobacco. France loaned money to the Continental Congress with tobacco as collateral. The new American government promised future tobacco shipments in exchange for French gold and weapons. Tobacco built America, and slavery made tobacco possible. By the 1800s, tobacco use was everywhere, but smoking wasn't the primary method. People chewed tobacco. They used snuff, powdered tobacco sniffed into the nose. Cigars were popular among the wealthy, but cigarettes barely existed. Why? Because cigarettes are harder to make. You need uniform tobacco, thin rolling papers, and consistent quality. It's labor-intensive. Hand-rolling cigarettes was slow and expensive. Then in 1880, James Bonsack invented the cigarette rolling machine. It could produce 120,000 cigarettes per day. More than 40 workers could roll by hand. It was precise, consistent, and ran continuously. One machine did the work of an entire factory floor. James Buchanan Duke bought the patent rights and started producing cigarettes at industrial scale. His company became the American Tobacco Company, a monopoly that controlled 90% of US cigarette production by 1900. Duke understood that manufacturing wasn't enough. He needed demand. So he became one of America's first mass-market advertisers. He spent enormous sums on advertising, more than any company before him. He put cigarette trading cards in packs featuring athletes, actresses, and historical figures. Kids collected them. Adults smoked the brand their kids wanted cards from. He advertised in magazines, on billboards, in streetcars. He sponsored sporting events. He gave free samples to college students and soldiers. He created brand loyalty before anyone understood what brand loyalty was. And it worked, spectacularly. Suddenly, cigarettes were cheap, consistent, and available everywhere. Duke advertised aggressively. He targeted women with campaigns claiming cigarettes were sophisticated and liberating. He targeted children with trading cards and brand mascots. Cigarette consumption exploded. In 1870, Americans smoked 27 million cigarettes. By 1900, they smoked 4 billion. By 1920, 45 billion. By 1940, 182 billion. Everyone smoked. Doctors smoked. Pregnant women smoked. Parents gave cigarettes to children for coughs. Cigarettes were marketed as healthy. Brands claimed they soothed throats, aided digestion, and calmed nerves. And people believed it. Why wouldn't they? Tobacco companies hired scientists to endorse cigarettes. They ran ads featuring doctors recommending specific brands. More doctors smoked Camels than any other cigarette. It was all lies, but effective lies. Then the evidence started piling up. By the 1930s, researchers were noticing something disturbing. Lung cancer rates were rising, fast. Lung cancer had been extremely rare before 1900. By 1930, it was becoming common. By 1950, it was epidemic. What changed? Cigarettes. In 1950, multiple studies proved the link. Researchers at the American Cancer Society, Harvard, and British Medical Journal all published findings showing cigarette smokers had dramatically higher lung cancer rates than non-smokers. The correlation was undeniable. More studies followed. Everyone confirmed the same thing. Cigarettes cause cancer. They cause heart disease. They cause emphysema and chronic bronchitis. The evidence was overwhelming, and tobacco companies knew it. Internal documents later revealed that by 1953, tobacco industry scientists had confirmed cigarettes were lethal. They knew their product killed customers. They had proof. So what did they do? They buried it. In December 1953, the heads of America's largest tobacco companies met in New York. They hired a public relations firm to create a response to the cancer research. The result was the frank statement to cigarette smokers, published in newspapers nationwide in January 1954. The frank statement claimed the health concerns were unfounded. It said tobacco companies cared about public health and would fund independent research. It promised transparency and cooperation with scientists. Every word was a lie. What they actually did was launch a decades-long campaign to manufacture doubt. They funded research designed to muddy the waters. They hired scientists to question the cancer link. They created front groups with official-sounding names: the Tobacco Industry Research Committee, the Council for Tobacco Research, that pretended to be independent, but were funded and controlled by tobacco companies. Their strategy was simple. You don't need to prove cigarettes are safe. You just need to create enough doubt that people keep smoking and regulators don't ban them. It worked for decades. They funded studies on everything except cigarettes and cancer. They researched diet and heart disease, stress and health, pollution and lung problems, anything to suggest alternative causes for the diseases cigarettes caused. When independent scientists published anti-smoking research, tobacco companies attacked them. They questioned their methodology. They accused them of bias. They funded other scientists to write rebuttals. They hired experts to testify before Congress and say the science wasn't settled, that more research was needed, that banning or regulating cigarettes would be premature. And all the while, they knew. Their own scientists were telling them cigarettes were deadly. Their own documents, revealed decades later in lawsuits, showed they knew about addiction, knew about cancer, knew everything. And they lied about all of it. By 1964, the evidence was so overwhelming that the US Surgeon General issued an official report, Smoking and Health. It concluded definitively that cigarettes cause lung cancer, chronic bronchitis, and probably heart disease. The tobacco industry's response? Keep lying. They claimed the Surgeon General was overreaching, that the science was still uncertain, that individual choice mattered more than government regulation. They fought warning labels for years. When they were finally forced to put warnings on cigarette packs, they made them as small and unobtrusive as possible. They fought advertising restrictions. When they couldn't advertise on TV, they advertised everywhere else. Magazines, billboards, sports sponsorships. They created cartoon mascots, like Joe Camel, to market cigarettes to children. And they kept targeting kids. Internal documents showed tobacco executives knew they needed to recruit young smokers to replace the customers who died. They needed to hook people before they turned 25, because that's when nicotine addiction forms most easily. One infamous internal memo from R.J. Reynolds stated, "Evidence is now available to indicate that the 14 to 18-year-old group is an increasing segment of the smoking population. We must soon establish a successful new brand in this market if our position in the industry is to be maintained over the long term." They were explicitly targeting children. They knew cigarettes killed people. They knew their customers were dying, and their solution was to addict more children. The lawsuits finally came in the 1990s. State attorneys general sued tobacco companies to recover healthcare costs for treating smoking-related diseases. The evidence was damning. Internal documents proved tobacco executives had lied under oath. They'd known cigarettes were addictive and deadly, and had covered it up for decades. In 1998, 46 states reached the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement with the major tobacco companies. The companies agreed to pay $206 billion over 25 years and accept advertising restrictions. But here's the thing, $206 billion sounds like a lot. It's not. Tobacco companies make that much in a few years. And the settlement didn't include admitting wrongdoing. It didn't include criminal charges. It didn't include prison time for executives who'd lied under oath and killed millions of people. They paid a fine and kept operating. To this day, tobacco companies are profitable and legal. Here's the death toll. Tobacco kills 8 million people per year worldwide. That's one person every 4 seconds. About 480,000 Americans die from smoking annually. That's 1 in 5 of all US deaths. That's more than deaths from alcohol, illegal drugs, car accidents, and murders combined. Every year, break it down further. 160,000 lung cancer deaths annually in the US alone. Another 120,000 from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Another 160,000 from heart disease caused or worsened by smoking. Plus strokes, other cancers, emphysema, and complications during pregnancy. Secondhand smoke kills another 41,000 Americans per year. They never chose to smoke. They just lived with smokers or worked in environments where smoking was allowed. They died from someone else's addiction. Since the 1960s, since we've known definitively that cigarettes kill, tobacco has killed over 20 million Americans. That's more than all American war deaths combined. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of them added together don't equal tobacco deaths. Globally, the 20th century saw about 100 million tobacco deaths. The 21st century is projected to see 1 billion tobacco deaths unless consumption drops dramatically. This isn't a natural disaster. This isn't a virus. This is a product manufactured and sold by corporations that kills half its long-term users. And it's legal. Regulated, taxed, but legal. Why? Because tobacco is profitable. Governments tax it and collect billions. Tobacco companies employ thousands. The economic interests are too powerful to ban, but mostly because the addiction is established. Worldwide, about 1.3 billion people smoke. You can't just ban a product that over 1 billion people are addicted to. Prohibition doesn't work when the substance is already widespread and addiction is entrenched. So we regulate it instead. We make it harder to buy. We ban advertising. We tax it heavily. We put warnings on the packs. And we let people keep dying. The modern tobacco playbook became the template for every corporate mass harm campaign since. Deny the science, fund doubt, attack critics, delay regulation, maximize profit until forced to stop. It's not just similar, it's identical. The same PR firms tobacco companies hired in the 1950s went on to work for oil companies, chemical manufacturers, and pharmaceutical companies. They took the tobacco playbook and applied it to new industries. Oil companies used it to deny climate change. They funded skeptical scientists. They created front groups with names like Global Climate Coalition and Cooler Heads Coalition. They claimed the science wasn't settled. They said regulation would hurt the economy. They knew fossil fuels caused climate change. Their own scientists confirmed it in the 1970s, and they lied about it for decades. Tobacco playbook. Chemical companies used it to defend pesticides and industrial pollutants. They attacked Rachel Carson when she published Silent Spring. They funded studies claiming DDT was safe. They delayed bans for decades while people got cancer from their products. Tobacco playbook. Pharmaceutical companies used it with opioids. Purdue Pharma knew OxyContin was addictive. They marketed it as safe anyway. They funded doctors to prescribe it. They created front groups promoting pain management. When people died, they blamed addicts, not the drug. Tobacco playbook. Tech companies use it now with social media addiction and child safety. They fund research claiming their platforms are fine. They attack whistleblowers. They delay regulation by claiming it would stifle innovation. They know their algorithms harm children's mental health. Their own research proves it, and they keep doing it. Tobacco playbook. The formula works. Hire scientists to create favorable research. Fund front groups with legitimate-sounding names. Claim the science isn't settled. Say regulation would hurt the economy. Keep selling the harmful product while people die. Pay settlements when caught. Never admit wrongdoing. Never face criminal charges. Tobacco companies pioneered this. They proved you could knowingly kill millions of people and face no criminal liability as long as you're a corporation. And now everyone does it. Here's what makes tobacco unique. We know exactly who's responsible. We have the names. We have the internal documents. We have proof that executives knew cigarettes killed people and decided to keep selling them anyway. In any just system, they'd be in prison. Executives who knowingly sold lethal products to children would face criminal charges. Companies that lied under oath would be dissolved. Wealth gained from killing millions would be seized. Instead, tobacco companies pay fines, rebrand, and continue operating. Philip Morris became Altria. They diversified into food and other products. The executives retired wealthy. Many received bonuses. The legal system treated tobacco companies killing millions of people as a civil matter, not a criminal one. Wrongful death, not murder. Settlements, not prison. And that established precedent. Corporations can kill people deliberately, knowingly, and face only financial penalties. The complete history of tobacco is the history of how corporations learned they can profit from mass death without criminal consequences. Tobacco built America. It funded colonial expansion. It drove slavery. It generated tax revenue. It employed millions. It integrated into culture so deeply that regulation became nearly impossible. And then it killed tens of millions of people while tobacco executives lied about it. They're still lying. Modern tobacco companies pivot to harm reduction products like vaping and heated tobacco while continuing to sell traditional cigarettes in developing countries with weaker regulations. Juul, the vaping company, targeted teenagers with flavored pods and social media marketing. They created a new generation of nicotine addicts. When caught, They paid fines. No one went to prison. Same playbook. Always the same playbook. Tobacco is legal because banning it is harder than tolerating the deaths. The addiction is established. The economic interests are entrenched. The regulatory capture is complete. So 8 million people die per year, and we accept it. We tax it. We warn about it. We restrict where you can smoke, but we let it continue. Because tobacco isn't just a drug. It's infrastructure. It's tax revenue. It's jobs. It's lobbying power. It's political donations. It's too embedded in the system to remove. That's the real lesson of tobacco history. It's not just about a plant that kills people. It's about how profit and addiction can make mass death acceptable. Tobacco companies knew their product was lethal and sold it anyway. They targeted children. They lied under oath. They funded fake science. They killed millions. And they got away with it. That's the complete history of tobacco, the drug that built America and proved that corporations can commit mass murder without facing criminal justice. The only consequences they face are financial. And the money they make from killing people is always more than the fines they pay for getting caught. That's not justice. That's the cost of doing business. 8 million people per year. One person every 4 seconds. For a legal product sold by legal companies, run by executives who face no criminal charges. The greatest corporate mass murder in history. And it's still happening. That's tobacco. Legal, regulated, taxed, and lethal. And we've normalized it.